This time on PedalBox, we're going to work on getting the front Aero ready to install back on the car again, because this still has a huge amount of tears in it, and these two pieces of metal are absolute junk. But first, a sit rep from the last episode. The garage has actually been tidied. This is a usable workbench once again. We cleared all the stuff off the floor, everything's away. We're ready back to do actual stuff in here, which is really good news. And a clean workbench is one of the main things I need to deal with the VR6, which is currently still sat on the engine stand over there. But granted, this side of the room is still not that great. We have got through all of the pile of stuff that was on here. There are now only a couple of car parts and a few nuts and bolts that need to go away into a couple of places, but you can actually get to the welding bench again, which is great news, ready for what I have planned for later this year when we rejig around a bunch of stuff in here. Maybe. I'll talk to you about that in another episode though, because for now, we're going to take a quick jump inside to see the new storage stuff before we get out here and get on with rebuilding all of that plastic mess. The new shelves are in, and the studio is looking a whole heap tidier than it was before. I mean, there's still a few bits and pieces around. The light needs to go back up, and there's some boxes from some new bits and pieces that we got, but plenty more boxes to store things in as well. But crucially, so many things have been moved away from the floor. Not that the floor is completely clear yet, but it's getting a lot better than it was. So now we can get back to doing maybe not what we do best, but certainly things that we need to get done. And that is going to begin with this GTO undertray. Now you've seen in the previous video where we took this off and we refurbished the motor so that we could get all of that working again. The mechanical side seems to be fine, but the tray itself is in pretty bad shape, and I'll show you a little bit more of that in a second. I also need to remake these two struts which go across. This one sits in this little recess under here, and this one I think goes underneath there. But basically, these are rotten. This one in particular has completely gone. The ends do absolutely nothing, and that is what's contributed some time ago to this being able to flex around, and it's broken through a lot of the plastic where it's just been able to flex the two mounting points on that rotational mechanism, push it up and down, and break it away. It's just fatigued it out to nothing, and that is a fairly big problem. The one at the back might actually be salvageable, but given I'm going to have to cut a piece of inch box pretty much in half to make one, I might as well remake the other. So we'll put them to one side for the time being, and we'll get on with this, because this, I think, is going to be the much, much bigger problem. So this is by far the worst section of the undertray. There's a bunch of tears where it's worn through. There's some pieces that have obviously either completely worn away or ripped off. There's some fatigue cracks where I think it's been flexing, going over speed bumps, and where it's been hitting it. And there's a big tear in this side as well, which I'm hopeful I can just realign and then try and attach back together. Now for all of these mounting points, obviously this is where this piece would go, but on the other side into this little channel. If you didn't see it a little bit better earlier, this is how this fits in and gives it a bit of strength all the way across the front edge of the splitter where the mechanism would rotate round and it will be able to deploy properly. Now with it in this condition, it's not going to do that very well. It's just going to keep flexing, tearing, and eventually it's going to break all the way through. There's already just a tiny bit left that's stopping this whole section just leaving the rest of it behind. So we need to do something about that. I was going to use fiberglass, either strands dropped into some resin or some mat over the top, but one way or another, roughing this up and putting the fiberglass on would probably hold it reasonably well. But given I'm sure this is almost certainly a thermoplastic, we might be able to use something that somebody reminded me about a little while ago. So this is a plastic welding kit, which I'm not sure if welding is the right term for it. All it is a heating element in which you put in these little plastic, well, these little metal staples designed to melt into the plastic. They just fit in the end like that. And then wherever you've got a break in some plastic, you just melt this in. Hopefully don't melt all the way through. Take this out, snip the tangs off, and you should have a mechanical join that bridges the gap, not just something that sits on the surface. So that should be ideal for what we need, particularly where this is going to have some high stress where the mechanism attaches. I might yet put some extra fiberglass on between where the mechanism pushes up and down, but we'll see how this goes. They are actually advertised specifically for repairing car bumpers, so they should be reasonably weather resistant. I guess it is just thermoplastic that most of these bumpers are made from anyway, so hopefully this will do the job. If it doesn't, well, we'll just go back to using nothing but fiberglass or reinforcing over the top of it with even more fiberglass, and hopefully that will repair it, and it means we don't have to go to using one of the aftermarket ones that somebody's had done for 650 quid. Now, before I start with the heat gun, I'm going to try and get rid of all of the remaining pieces of metal. This one was especially difficult to get out, and there's a couple of little metal clips on here that we need to remove as well. So we get rid of those, put them in the pile of parts. I also need to get rid of this bracket on this end, which removing it is what did a lot of damage to this one, and I've still got this piece on the end. So we'll get started on that first.
I'm going to use the heat gun to try and remold the undertray into its original shape. Not only is it pretty battered at this point, the less stress trying to pull the repairs apart, the better. I tried to avoid using the angle grinder to remove these bolts as long as possible, because the added heat might just cause even more distortions or damage and just give me more work to do. However, this one was not cooperative.
Well, that doesn't look like it was the success I'd hoped it was going to be. All three of those bolts have rounded off to some degree or other, and I'm having real difficulty getting anywhere with them. The two on the bracket end are currently soaking in release agent, and this one, when I took the angle grinder to it, the washer heated up and just melted its way through the plastic. So that at least confirms that we can melt things in, or indeed out of, this plastic, and I'm going to have to do something to try and patch this up, and I have no idea what that's going to be. But that is really, really unfortunate. So in the meantime, whilst I come up with an idea for this and the other one soaks in the release agent, I'm going to go through and try to get some of this to align slightly better. Now, this has a recess where the panel would go in, and I believe it would sit over this, so on this side, and the panel would sit under this side, screw through and hold in place. But at the moment, this is quite obviously bent right the way down. So I'm going to apply some gentle heat and a little bit of pressure from this piece of steel, some grips, and just try and manipulate it around to try and straighten it all out. Well, that seems to have worked reasonably well. The plastic, where it was curling all the way down underneath, is now sitting quite happily. I've just had it supported on these bits of metal. Now these edges almost join up. So in order to keep the shape, I'm going to try the first one of these and basically just join it like that. And hopefully that will be enough just to maintain the alignment for what I need. There's a few more bits that I'm going to try that on as well, just this one over here, just to try and mash that back into its correct shape, and then we can move on to the much, much bigger problem area. Okay, let's try this. So you just line it up there, put the power on, and oh wow, that melted in really very quick. Okay, that seemed pretty easy, and it's definitely holding. Let's just flush cut those ends off, or these aren't actually flush cutters, but never mind. Close enough for this. Okay, they are surprisingly firm. Yeah, great. That's exactly what I wanted. At least it didn't jump up into my face. Hey, that one didn't even make a hole. That shouldn't be a good thing. But that does seem to be holding pretty well on there. I will probably go over with a soldering iron and just massage the plastic in so it's kind of covering it up a little bit more. Well, those two worked pretty well. We managed to get the right shape into it. This one's a lot tougher because it's not just a bend or a twist in a small area. This one actually goes all the way along over about 8 inches, sort of 200 mil, give or take, and there's a break across. So we're going to have to put one of the little melt-in inserts into there, but hopefully we can get some of this major twist out of it, because this is meant to be flat as best as I can tell. Well, those all went a lot better than I expected. I've got one more I need to do on this panel, which is this big dip over here, just to try and get it a little bit straighter along the edge for whatever panel goes in there to fit up a little bit more flush. The biggest thing that I found is actually cooling is half the battle. Getting it nice and soft and malleable and getting it to stay in shape is one thing. But if you move it around before it's cooled, you just put the flex back in a different way or back where it was. This edge hasn't quite cooled as nicely as I wanted, so I'm going to redo this one. But the big problem I have now is dealing with this massive tear around a very important mounting point, and it doesn't quite want to line up even as nicely as this one did, and that one was a bit of a fight. So first up, I put a piece of inch box section under it just to fit into the gap, to give it an approximate shape and give me some room that I can sort of mold it around underneath and really kind of try and reform the general area with a little bit of heat from the heat gun first of all. So we'll get that going whilst I'm just trying to move this around. I did put a little bit of heat into it earlier as well, and it was doing okay, but basically you just want to wash the warmth not just around the area you want to try and work on around here, it's also all the way up around the top edges to relax it into the shape you want it to try and take. And even fairly quickly I've found, with a little bit of pressure on and just warming it across, obviously don't get it too close that you burn your hand, but you can hold it in the right kind of alignment, and you start seeing some of the edges just fall back into place where they've obviously torn away from. That's getting there now. So I want to try and cool it down and move it into place as I cool it. And this one I have gone a little bit further because it's such a big area. I'm going to have to use the welding gloves to try and hold it all in place. Obviously we're not melting this back together at this point, we're just trying to move it around to see where it wants to line up to. Looks like some of this has worn away because it doesn't quite line up across the top, so I think this is definitely going to need a little bit of reinforcement with some fiberglass somewhere. But that is holding reasonably well. Now we can start getting some reinforcement in around this edge and just work it back up. We'll see where we get to. Well, I've got this end of the panel all stitched up as best I possibly can. There are some holes that I'm going to show you in a second and the plan for fixing them. But this end, where it still needs stitching together, is proving much more difficult. Only because of these two bolts that hold this little mount on. I've rounded one of them off almost completely. It's a 12mm bolt. I now can't get an 11mm on there. There's still too much material. I don't want to take any more off. I'd rather just use a bolt extractor on it. The other one is still got shape. It still keys nicely onto a 12mm socket, but there is absolutely no way I can get it to do anything. Every time I put the socket on, I'm just tweaking it around, and it's just the socket starting to round over the end. So that is going to be a big problem. I've had it soaking in release spray for ages to try and get it to do absolutely anything, and it has done nothing. It's made no difference whatsoever. So you can see here the problem I have. These two bolts will not release the panel from underneath, or the bracket from underneath it, which is currently in the vise, and I can't get in to try and stitch this back together until that piece is removed. I think I'm going to have to drill these out, because if I go in using the angle grinder and just try to slice them off, I'm going to have exactly the same problem I did at the other end, where I just melted through the plastic and the whole thing came off. So that is going to be a long-term problem. I'm not going to let it beat me. I'm not going to put this piece back on with this scabby bracket. It is going to get cleaned off, and if that means I have to drill out these bolts, so be it. So the big problem still remaining at this end, obviously there is a large hole where the material is completely worn away, and as much as these two pieces are joined together and are holding the right sort of shape, they're still not going to last very long if we just leave them as they are. You can get plastic infill tools with a metal mesh that you put in, and then you melt more plastic into it in order to join it all together and try and fuse it to rebuild some of what you had before when you have big gaping wounds like this. Over here it's the same problem. Whilst it is stitched pretty well back together, some of them have got fairly close to going through. It's not ideal and it really needs reinforcement. There is a couple of holes, one here and one down this side, that still need sort of refixing and rebuilding in the same way that this one will. Plus there's another couple of holes around and about on the rest of it, which we can also try and improve. So the next thing I'm going to do instead is go through these brackets, try and get rid of all of these stuck bolts, drill them out, clean these brackets up and get some new material welded into a couple of spots and some nuts welded on. On the front, there's little metal brackets that sit underneath here to give this plastic a little bit more strength. We're going to drill all of these little rivets out, take all of those off, clean them down, paint them, and then put them back on again. So unfortunately, I suspect, given the tool to fix all of these parts hasn't arrived yet, I think this is going to turn into a bit of a two-parter. Well, this piece might actually be the death of me. I've spent 2 hours getting this clean and getting all of the previous paint that we very quickly put on, which obviously wasn't enough. I think that was a little bit optimistic of me, getting that off this piece. All of the other ones that we took off, absolutely fine. Cleaned them up with the wire wheel, taken the bolts out, put new nuts on where we had to just slice those off. They've been acid washed, primed, painted and lacquered. 2 coats all the way through, and they're hanging up outside on the washing line, so they will definitely be done for tomorrow. This one, the outside is cleaned up really, really nicely. There is virtually nothing left. Went over that with the wire wheel on the grinder, same as all the other ones. But then you get to the inside, and as soon as you try to use the wire wheel anywhere inside here, it catches it and it just wants to launch this out of my hand when I'm trying to move it around. There's no easy way to clamp it in the vise to do it, because really it needs to be that way down so that you can get on it with the grinder that way. Absolutely no doing. So I've spent probably an hour and a half in total using Abranet and sandpaper to clean the inside of this, to get as much of the roughness out as I possibly can, and then eventually I used the Dremel to get rid of as much of the sort of the loose detritus in there as I possibly can as well. There are 2 broken bolts in it, which are going to have to be a tomorrow problem. I'm probably just going to slice the nuts off where the welds are, just trim that out and weld 2 more M6 nuts in their place, because it's going to be easier than trying to extract these. I tried it before to extract it, it did nothing, and I just sliced those nuts off. So that's going to be the easy fix for that one. I say easy like it's going to be a walk in the park, given that one is right down inside the very middle section of it. But it can't be worse than using sandpaper to try and clean out the inside. So I'll probably give it another quick go over tomorrow, get some more sandpaper and run over that. And then it's going to be acid dipped like all the other ones, well, acid washed, I guess, and then primed, painted, lacquered like all of the others and put to one side. And then when those are done, well, when that are done, we can get on to remaking these 2 pieces. Unfortunately, we're not going to get a chance to reinstall all of this episode. The tool that I need for rebuilding the plastic on the bumper with the little mesh and the sort of plastic sticks you melt in, it's just not going to be here in time. So unfortunately, it's going to be a next part when we actually get all of this back together and on the car. Maybe on that one, we'll also take apart the rear one. But for now, I'm going to go inside because I am filthy. I am blowing rust out of my nose. And this is as done as I can be bothered to get it tonight. So I think I've had enough, and it's something like 8:30 as well. So that feels like, yeah, dinner time. Well, it's been more than a couple of days, and I have a collection of painted pieces of steel from the undertray in front of me. However, I have not finished making the bracing that I was going to. Unfortunately, I came down with a cold shortly after doing this piece, taking all of the original paint and lacquer and everything else off that I'd put on the previous time we had this off. And ultimately, I ruined my shoulder sanding it. I got RSI in both of my hands with the sanding, trying to get in and clean everything out. It's not perfect, but it's significantly better than it was, and it has a much, much better coat of paint on it. There's 2 coats of undercoat, 2 coats of paint, and at least 2 coats of lacquer, and they are fairly thick in a couple of places because there's a few runs. Fortunately, you will never see this piece, so the runs are largely going to be hidden by all of the trim around it. And I am not here to be a perfectionist, I'm not here to do a concourse restoration, I'm here to get it working again. So that one got done. All of the small pieces of trim that I took off, the little reinforcing straps, they are all done the same. They came up really nicely. and these two strips which go around the edge that had those holes in, I ended up welding in some washers and some nuts so that they would once again have all of the fitment that they needed. The tool, in order to rebuild all of the plastic on the Aero, has actually now arrived, so that will be coming up in the next episode we work on the GTO, which might be the next episode you actually see, but we'll see how things go. I've got a lot of other bits and pieces I need to sort out, including bits on the old kit car project. We've got an ECU, as I mentioned a couple of times in a couple of episodes, so we really want to get that ECU on and tested. So that will be coming up soon, but there might be another GTO episode before then. We'll also have a Thunderbird episode update, which will hopefully be either coming back or we'll go down to where it's getting work done and get a bit of video and splice that into something there. So in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget you can go to shop.pedalbox.show where you can buy t-shirts like this and more variants as well. You can also join us on patreon.com/pedalboxshow where you can get a discount if you're a patron on the merch shop. So if you do want to buy anything, maybe go over to Patreon first if you're going to buy quite a bit. Don't forget to join us on the Discord. Link should be down below. I think I fixed all of those links in all of the episodes now because apparently one or more of them had expired at some point. So I needed to fix all of those. And other than that, thank you very much for watching. Sorry about the gap last week. We will be back to normal service this summer, hopefully with some more work actually done. I need to stop saying hopefully because I'm hoping an awful lot for a lot of things, and it was really starting to bug me when I was initially editing some of this episode whilst I was ill. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.